Chapter 4, Michigan, 1984. I traveled through the night and had a layover in Tennessee. I was not in a hurry to get to Michigan because I was enjoying the long bus ride. I napped off as soon as I opened my eyes. I could see rivers while the sunlight shined brightly. We crossed over the Kentucky Bridge. I tried to turn my head around to look behind me, but there wasn't enough view, so I imagined the many miles I had traveled. I smiled in disbelief that this could not be just a dream. Then I came to my senses while listening to the bus engine. The bus driver kept trying to talk to me about life and wanted to know where I was going, but I had been warned to be careful and not to say much. During my layover, I called Saul Collect. He was excited to hear my voice. Then he asked me to come to Chicago, but of course I could not. My Aunt Christine was expecting my arrival at the bus station downtown. She wasn't able to pick me up, but she made arrangements for a family friend to be there. I didn't know what my life was going to be like or where I was headed. However, I kept an optimistic attitude and promised myself that I wouldn't change to be the ugly things my grandmother had spoken over my life. When I was 15, I had no realistic goals. I had dreamed about going off to Hollywood to become an actress until my father lectured me. I could turn out ruined by drugs and alcohol or end up committing suicide. I had also seen an ad in Ebony magazine about being paid for writing songs or poems. I was intrigued, but my father was discouraging about this as well. While living in Detroit with Aunt Christine and Velvet for a short time, I felt that I needed to move on. I wasn't in school or doing anything with my time but watching Velvet. I started bouncing from one aunt's house to the next. Finally, I became so bored that I decided to go visit Saul in Chicago. He sent me the money to take the bus. I had heard so much about Chicago and had always wanted to see it. However, I was disappointed by the amount of litter and people hanging out at all times of the night. I had never seen so many young pregnant teenage girls standing at the bus stops. I was shocked and sad to see things in a place that had sounded like a city of opportunities. I had learned quickly that every big city has its poverty, ghetto, and crime. During this trip, I also visited my dear friend Twyla. She had a different spirit from the girl that I had met in Alabama. She talked about gangs, and her whole demeanor was aggressive. I thought she had an easy life and things were given to her because she was beautiful. When she expressed that she didn't believe that Saul was right for me, I was shocked, but I didn't follow her advice. She did not like Saul because she knew that he was a slickster and a player, but I was deeply in love with him and couldn't see what this meant for my future. I didn't care who said what. I was crazy about him. He was handsome and a skilled welder, and his kindness drew people to him. He was generous and fun, a big Southern talker. Still, I saw things about him that I hadn't imagined when I was in high school. Whenever we went places, women were flirting with him in my face. It made me behave violently, and I started using cuss words a lot. I stayed only for a weekend and left unhappy, but still in love. And I gave him something precious to my soul, my virginity. It wasn't romantic like I had imagined it would be. Maybe it was because I wasn't ready to be a woman, but I felt that I loved him and I wanted to make a life with him. I went back to Michigan feeling down and trying to figure things out. I was trying to find stability. Aunt Vanessa is Jonathan's baby sister. We are 6 years apart in age. She called to ask if I wanted to live with her and work at her job. I accepted her offer. By the end of the summer, I was working at a bacon factory in Mount Clemens. It was cool at first because I was earning a paycheck, but I was not too fond of the heat and working the third shift. I also had a hard time trying to get a stable place to live. My family's homes had limited space and they had enough kids already. It was tough trying to live out of a bag and a suitcase. However, I became committed to the job and started hanging out at the bars with my aunt and her friends. I met guys there that wanted to date me, but I didn't find any prospects interesting. One attractive guy from Detroit who looked like Prince asked me out. He was fine, but I wasn't feeling the dating scene. I continued working hard and saving my money. I bought a few clothes and babysat for my family. Saul occasionally called towards the end of the summer, making promises and then breaking them. I knew that I loved him, but I didn't know why. Still, he was the only man I had eyes for. I didn't know how to move on. I started losing hope about being with him in terms of marriage and having kids. However, I began to feel a sense of loss. How could this be when I was free and 18? I didn't understand what the world had to offer. I was hung up on being in love and feeling loved. Eventually, I got tired of waiting for Saul to come to visit. As the seasons changed, fall was approaching, and I started to forget all about Chicago and Saul. Then during Christmas, I got a surprise visit from him. I felt so happy and special. The fairy tale was back. It was snowing outside, and the tree limbs were frozen. Christmas music was playing everywhere I went, and everybody seemed to be in the holiday spirit. I wanted time to stand still forever because I was feeling the love. I finally got some one-on-one attention, and my heart was feeling things that I wanted to feel. Saul had to leave to get back to work in Chicago, and saying goodbye was hard. As the months went by, we kept in touch and sent cards and letters. In the spring of 1985, Saul was laid off from his job and decided to visit to see if he wanted to relocate. We stayed in a small kitchenette because shacking wasn't permitted in my upbringing. My grandparents believed in marrying you off by age 16, but I was happy we were together and not having to rush our time. We had talked about having a family in the past and where we would like to live. One day, Saul received a call from his brother, letting him know that a trucking company wanted to offer him a job back in Chicago, driving trucks. He was also being called back to his current employer after being laid off. I panicked about the news, and then we found out that I was pregnant. Saul kept saying that I better not be, but I was, and that was the truth. He was in a dilemma over choosing to drive trucks or accept going back to his old job and being a father. It, of course, changed the direction of both our lives. I pleaded for us to stay together as a family. Saul declined the truck driver's job and decided to go back to work in Chicago. We spent a month apart while he worked on a plan to move me there. He called to let me know that everything was set up and when to expect his bus arrival. I finished packing everything I had in my car. I rode downtown to the bus station in Detroit to pick him up, and this was the evening that I eloped to Chicago.